name is Hilton Owls, and I want to take this opportunity really to thank Stephen Best, director of the Townsend Center, for inviting me to make a few remarks about Jamaica, a writer I love. You will be hearing the word love quite a bit in these remarks. It's not a terribly popular word, let alone sentiment, in a universe being overrun just now by agents that are contra the idea, let alone reality, of love and its various offshoots, including immunity, trust, liberty. But I believe it is still our word to fight for and embrace and protect because it contains worlds. And in the world of Jamaica's fiction and nonfiction, which taken together amounts to poetry, epic poetry, love doesn't necessarily triumph. Heartbreak and chaos can and sometimes does, but that doesn't vanquish her various narrators' longing once and again for the experience of love's sweet and painful yearning, which is one of life's constants, a yearning that is at the heart of so many of the stories Jamaica tells us, means to tell us. I've often been flummoxed by how few critics get that Jamaica's writing, growing as it does, out of a convergence of ideas about people, about the earth, about family and society, about the natural world as it exists apart from and in relation to the world we've made and continue to muck up, has at its heart certain ideas not about love as romance, but love as an aspect of the Edenic, a real place where love flowered once, a home where a mother once stood holding nourishment in one hand and protection in another, an Eden where Black people were in the majority, and while the effects of British rule could be felt, it was minimized by the power of community, of being together, of having force. But Jamaica was cast out of the Eden early on. She was sent to work in America when she was 16, and no one in her home gave a thought to her future, but boy, did she make her future. And it's the fight to return to some idea of Eden and the demand for some sort of explanation about why one was cast out, why was she made to feel so lonely on this earth so early on, that informs many of the early stories that appeared in The New Yorker and her latest novel, See Now Then, which is about the end of love, even though the protagonist never stops dreaming of it and feeling it through her children and the long ago days when she thought she was being loved. Actually, if you look at the early stories in the last novel, you will see what I'm talking about, what Jamaica has described in what she might call a cauldron of love. She hasn't said that, but I will say it for her. That cauldron, deep and black, contains the muck of love, its bitter and sometimes sweet uncertainty, its ability to not heal all but succor some. We all know, or should, that love is a risky proposition, unsteady on its feet as it moves through unknown atmospheres and thickets of danger to get at itself. What's that song that Björk sings where she dares the subject to love, to take it on, make a mess, live? I hear in Jamaica's imagery and various propositions that dare and her inconsolability. Why not more love? Why not? Where did it go? And in asking the question, she dares herself to think about it, dares us to ponder it. She dares herself to think about it, dares us to ponder it, and thus ourselves. Certainly that's one of the messages of Jamaica's latest book, The Brilliant and Encyclopedia of Gardening for Colored Children, with drawings by the great Kara Walker. It's a book Jamaica has said that she wished she had as a child. And isn't it marvelous that she never lost that child, she who had to mother herself even in her loneliness. That loneliness and the desire for love is what we hear if we listen closely enough to the wishes laid out in her 1978 story, In the Night. Quote, "Now I am a girl, but one day I will marry a woman, a red-skinned woman with black bramble-bush hair and brown eyes, who wears skirts that are so big I can easily bury my head in them. I would like to marry this woman and live with her in a mud hut near the sea. In the mud hut will be 2 chairs and 1 table, a lamp that burns kerosene, a medicine chest, a pot, 1 bed, 2 pillows, 2 sheets, 1 looking glass, 2 cups, 2 saucers, 2 dinner plates, 2 forks, two drinking glasses, 1 china pot, 1 book of plain paper, 1 box filled with 12 crayons of different colors, 1 loaf of bread wrapped in a piece of brown paper, 1 coal pot, 1 picture of 2 women standing on a jetty, 1 picture of the same 2 women embracing, 1 picture of the same 2 women waving goodbye, 1 box of matches. Every day, this red-skinned woman and I will eat bread and milk for breakfast, hide in bushes, and throw hardened cow dung at people we don't like. Oops. Climb coconut trees, pick coconuts, eat and drink the food and water from the coconuts we have picked, thrown stones in the sea, put on John Bull masks, and frighten defenseless little children on their way home from school, go fishing, and catch only our favorite fishes to roast and have for dinner, steal green figs to eat for dinner with the roast fish. Every day we would do this. Every night I would sing this woman a song. The words I don't know yet, but the tune is in my head. This woman I would like to marry knows many things, but to me she will only tell me things that would never dream of making me cry. And every night, over and over, she will tell me something that begins, before you were born. I will marry a woman like this, and every night, I will be completely happy. And it's in that imagined Eden that Jamaica's writing flourishes, along with that which you will not shut out of it, Lucifer, the apple, the gnarled tree of knowledge, being made a stranger in one's own land, and then returning as a different woman altogether, unafraid of uncertainty, and what love often leaves you with, longing and words. Ladies and gentlemen, Jamaica Kincaid.
Oh boy. It was wonderful, all those kind things Hilton said. I'd forgotten that story. And thank you.
Hello, Jamaica. Welcome. It's an honor to be on the stage with you.
Thank you.
I've wanted this event to happen since my earliest days as a faculty member at Berkeley, so
thank you.
It's really... And I always feel, I'm not going to use the correct word here, but like a backdraft of like gratitude where Hilton is concerned. So thank you for that lovely introduction, Hilton. Yeah, that was magnificent. So I've come with copies of a few of your books. It's partly because for me, and Hilton's introduction is sort of evidence of this, that, you know, there's a kind of poetry to your prose where kind of emotion really pivots on the rhythm, the repetition, the strain within a sentence, where a word falls within a sentence. And so I hope you don't mind if we structure this conversation around the precision of some of those sentences. As there are access to the kind of amplitude of the emotions, right? And I have a colleague who's a literary critic who he jokingly sort of says he envies art historians because when art historians give talks, everyone can sort of look at the images that they're sort of talking about, and that with literature, you're often talking about something that maybe others haven't read.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that we have the actual writing here sort of before us to enjoy. So could we have slide 2? I have. Well, I wanted to start. We have a mirror. We have a mirror image, so you don't have to crane your neck. So I read this interview you did with Daryl Pickney in the Paris Review. It was, I think, a 2-part review interview. I think first part happened in Vermont, and then the second part happened after the pandemic.
Yes.
Yeah. And this passport photo is one of the things that most struck me in that interview, partly, who produces a passport photo of such terrible beauty, of the sense of, this is Elaine, right? And I kept thinking, looking at this photo of just the Aegon, Hilton talks about this a bit, of being sent, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm the child of Caribbean, West Indian immigrants as well, and immigrant children can sort of romanticize being sent, right? Being sent to university, being sent to New York, being sent to England. The writer Ocean Vuong, child of refugees, he describes it being that child who is sent as sort of being on a boat, alone on a boat, and then sort of realizing that they are not with you on that boat. Mm. And in that sense, they've betrayed you because they sent you off and didn't tell you that they wouldn't be going along. But it was so different for you. You understand the betrayal, and you're far less sentimental about being sent. I hope you'll forgive me for sharing this photo.
Not at all.
I love this photo.
I didn't when I was having it taken because it was the beginning of the sending away.
Yeah.
But now I think.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask you. Now what do you think?
I think, gosh, that was me. And you can't really see it, but now. But I had fallen down steps in Dominica with my mother's family, and I had a split in my lip, and I was sent to the Princess Margaret Hospital in Roseau, and they stitched it up, and I had a little scar on my lip. And as I've aged, it's disappeared. Oh. Not only that, my lips have lost their nice plumpness. I used to be so pleased with them. They were so... Yes, but no, I'm very happy to see that photograph. But also, what perhaps isn't so evident to a viewer, but very, very present in my memory and in my heart, is the feeling of betrayal.
Yeah.
Yes, of being sent away and into a world. Now that I think of it, for all my parents knew, they would have been smuggling people. They just sent me off with people they didn't know, and so I was supposed to send my salary home. Yes. To my family, which I did for a while, and then I didn't. Mm-hmm. I spent my money buying rather nice clothes at Bonwit. I was the best dressed servant you ever saw.
I'm sure. I want to read the last line from my garden book. You write, there's so much in this, quote, Eden is like that, so rich in comfort, it tempts me to cause discomfort. I'm in a state of constant discomfort, and I like that state so much, I would like to share it. I kind of felt like that was a statement of your life's work, in a way. A kind of open invitation, right, into...
Yes. Well, I find comfort, and that's, I can see the trouble with Eden and paradise, that comfort leads to a kind of death in which you're not multiplying ideas, work, you are just comfortable. And I always wonder about those people who do things, because there'll be something in paradise. Paradise is really hell, as you can often see people, for instance, with a lot of money, and they're always building some paradise. And the more they indulge in this paradisical world, the more dead they look, the more not only dead they look, but the more death they create, the more, lifelessness. So, yes, I think discomfort, and I'm speaking of discomfort, not the princess and the pea kind of discomfort, but the ability to just think your way through something, or maybe not through it, but just to think, and so that you avoid, I think we can't help but do terrible things, but maybe if you think your way about it, you might do the terrible thing less, just maybe build a highway, but not one that displaces the Black residents.
Right.
Things like that.
Right.
So I find it comfort. It's that thing. It's something in English literature, a style. When you come to a style, you rest, and so. But you walk and you walk, and then you come to a style, and you rest. That's what I think life should be like. A hard road, or a road, but you travel on it and then you rest. The discomfort is in the traveling and the style. Incidentally, I used to do a very good imitation as a child of the poem, There Was a Crooked Man, and apparently, and I got in trouble for it, but just to perhaps show you what that girl, gosh, I was so angry, but not really angry, in despair that what was happening to me. I was in Antigua this past January, and I had a conversation with the man who's now the cultural minister of something. Countries like mine always have a minister of culture. Yes. So he reminded me that he and I were in the same school, and that when the headmaster came into our classroom, he would ask a question, and he would point to the two of us to say that we were not to answer, because we always knew the answer. And he was telling me how competitive he was with me, because the higher marks you got, you went to this school called the Princess Margaret School, which is a whole story.
We actually want to hear it, but no.
But he left out the part where I surpassed. It was he and his brother. Usually I was the top of the class, and the top of the class, you'd get to go to this new wonderful school, the Princess Margaret School, and they were determined to go. And one day they waited for me in an alley and beat me up. He the man who's now the Minister of Culture. He left out
He didn't
that
recall
part.
that, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, he didn't
yes.
recall that.
He left out that part and I didn't remind him.
Yeah.
I felt so self-righteous.
Yeah, superior,
Yes,
superior,
yes.
yeah. You could blank the slide. When I went to college, I think the first literature course I took was called Literature by Women. And I remember I read Jane Eyre for that class and went back to my dorm after the class, called my mother because I loved Jane Eyre and said, we had to read Jane Eyre this week for class. And my she was from St. Vincent, as I told you. Her response was, "You're only reading that now?" And like that, so that, that was her way of sort of saying, this very expensive education that I'm paying for was one that she managed to get on the cheap, right, in St. Vincent. You've spoken on occasion of like feeling when you arrived in the United States that your Antiguan education was not kind of up to American standards, or I remember reading that somewhere. But my mother's example, right? The example of your work is in some way would put into question the, or rather, I wonder if our American standards are quite what they're made out to be. And I just wondered if you could talk a bit about like that, the literary education you get in the Caribbean.
Yeah, I can't speak for the Francophile.
The British West Indies.
The Anglophile. Well, we were given an education. There's a saying that the British Empire was run by 600 men, except for Gertrude in Iraq. And they all went to this place called Eton or Harrow or something, and they designed an education that was for us. But the education stopped when we were either 13 or 15, unless you could afford to go to a private school and go on. But within that, they gave us, we would have a lesson on, not Whistler, the great landscape painter.
Turner?
Turner.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have a whole, this is a landscape, and William Turner, and this is what he did, and this is where he lived. And of course, the idea was that the landscape we lived in was not worthy of such. For instance, in places where we live, where there are a lot of trees, it's called a jungle. But in England, it's called a forest. And so there were little things like that, though it was very grand. I mean, I knew all about the Roman Empire and its rule in Britain. I knew Shakespeare. I read Jane Eyre. In fact, that was a key moment in my life, reading Jane Eyre. I later would pretend that I was not only Jane Eyre, I was also Charlotte Bronte.
Charlotte Bronte.
Yes, I would dress. I had read somewhere that she lived in Belgium and was very cold and hungry, and I would pretend I was her in the hot climate. But the education was really a weapon. It wasn't meant, it was meant for us to know about them and to feel inferior to them. So as I've written about many times, in many forms, the example of the daffodil, which was a great poem by William Wordsworth. And to this day, when I was back in Antigua, they still have to memorize a daffodil. They have no idea, the children, I had no idea what a daffodil is. And it actually, and this is an example, of powerful people thinking they are in power and so enjoying it, and it's wonderful to be powerful. They never recognize the damage they're doing to themselves. And it's up to us to tell them, people like me and you, to tell them, this is how you're fucking up yourself. But so we had this extraordinary education, but nothing really to do with it. And I remember thinking very ill of Wordsworth, really. Though I read the prelude while trying to finish writing a short story, and before I could finish the short story, I had read the whole thing. But the education that your mother had, and I had, and Wole Soyinka, all through the British Empire, Derek Walcott, all of us had the same education, but it was an education about England.
Yeah.
And it really did not encourage self-reflection. So that for a while, you were made to believe that there were slaves, but you were not from them. They were just some sort of part of the tableau of the colonization of the British Empire. I lived on a street called Nelson Street, named after Horatio Nelson. The other streets were named after, one was named after John Hood, and I think John Hood was had captured a ship of slaves from the Spanish, and he sold the slaves, took the money back to England, and Elizabeth I knighted him for opening a new form of trade. He was knighted for opening a new form of trade. The trade was slave selling people. Not slaves, selling people. And he was given a coat of arms of a black man, an African, kneeling in chains. That's his coat of arms. So when we read things like that, or lived on a street named after John Hood, it didn't encourage us to put two and two together. The street over from that one would be Hawkins, and then there was, let me see, Rodney Nelson, Hood, Hawkins, Drake. Drake, of course, Sir Francis Drake, an incredible criminal. But you know, so we lived within our own literary hell. We had to memorize the dates of all these people. Of course, the Christopher Columbus story. He was portrayed as an explorer, a wanderer, the magic of the world. And of course, there were times when he was also portrayed as, someone from Spain or Italy or Portugal, whom the British did not consider white people, which is another wonderful thing to come to America, to see all these people from all over the world with fair skin, just adjacent white people. I call them adjacent white people. White adjacent.
You noticed that upon arrival.
Yes, the white adjacent people.
This actually might be a good moment to talk about to talk about botany. You know, because like I was thinking as I was rereading your work and I thought to myself, you know, Kew Gardens is it was always a puzzle to me why the location of the Royal Botanic Gardens and the archives of the British Colonial Office were
at Kew. Kew is a very interesting place.
It's such an interesting place.
It's really an agricultural extension. You know, Harvard had one in Cuba. When Harvard had a botanical garden in Cuba, It's in ruins now, but they were interested in the uses of the thing called the economic annual. The economic annual is cotton, sugar, cane, tomatoes, everything like that. And but the botanic garden that is so glorified at Kew, it was to send plants from all over the emerging second British Empire, because the first British Empire was America.
Right.
After 1776, and it was lost. Then they went to India and Africa and created the second British Empire. Just for instance, when the British met India, India had the third largest economy in the world. When they left, it had the 60th. Just to but the Botanic Garden, yes, they would send things there and then distribute them. And speaking of St. Vincent, the first botanical garden
that's right.
in this part of the Western Hemisphere, it was in St. Vincent. The second was in Jamaica, and it's where Captain Bligh took the breadfruit.
So I brought something.
The mutiny on the Bounty.
Slide number 4, please.
Yes.
Yes, the Robert Dodd.
Yes.
This is the first voyage to retrieve the breadfruit from Tahiti.
Yes.
And you can see the breadfruit trees sort of on the ship. But this is...
The trees had a much better compartment on the ship than the sailors, and it's partly part of their mutiny. Now, the reason for the breadfruit being shipped is because the planters were continually asking for a cheap source of food for the slaves, because for some peculiar reason, the slaves kept taking time out from their slaving rework to grow food for themselves. And so it was interfering with the economy of producing their wealth. So that's the breadfruit. And just to, you might be wondering how this integrates into my writing, you, the audience, not you. But just to tell you that I have never seen my writing as apart from this thing you call politics. And just to tell you, when someone say, oh, that's political, you mustn't accept it. Everything is political, including just to get out of a bed in the morning, because, well, where did you get the bed? And how did you get to be in it? So when I write about the breadfruit and the botanic garden, it's not political, it's just a fact. Incidentally, the other thing about the second botanical garden in Jamaica was established. Oh, Europeans, they're so funny. It was established near a hot spring in Jamaica because it was comfortable, and they called that part of Jamaica Bath, because it reminded them of Bath, England. Yes, you see, the nettedness of the world, which incidentally is separate from the Earth. The Earth is a planet, the world is our human invention.
Yeah, so there was a second voyage because of this mutiny. There was a second expedition, 30,000-mile expedition to get the breadfruit to the Caribbean. Can I read you something? Joseph Banks, who you write about.
Yes, you have to explain to people who do. Joseph Banks is a founder of Kew Gardens and a great writer, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
Everything can be forgiven if you're a great writer.
And he's the botanist who kind of organized this sort of retrieval of the breadfruit from Tahiti to bring it to the Caribbean, and he wrote about the retrieval, the breadfruit in Tahitian society. He felt that it freed Tahitian society from the necessity of labor. And so when you read him, you kind of, between the lines, when you think of, like you say, the way in which the Caribbean is like kind of embedded in this, like you hear the Caribbean in this description. He writes, in the article of food, these happy people, the Tahitians, may almost be said to be exempt from the curse of our forefathers. Scarcely can it be said that they earned their bread with the sweat of their brow, when their chiefest substance, breadfruit, is procured with no more trouble than that of climbing a tree and pulling it down. Like that's his sort of description of like the Tahitian breadfruit.
But see the conflict in the man. This is a brilliant man. He looks at these people. He knows nothing about their daily lives. He's decided that they don't need to cultivate food. They just pick up breadfruit. He doesn't know how they know to eat the breadfruit, how they could. There's nothing about them. He just makes this assumption. And but since they're so happy, and so why not leave them alone? No, he must disturb their life, bring the breadfruit back to people whose lives he's made miserable. This constant moving and rearranging the world and causing such misery, just, first of all, one thing, Americans, why I'm glad you brought up Joseph Banks, but that trip of Captain Cook's, his supposedly voyage around the world, and it was said that he wanted to observe the transit of Venus. The transit of Venus happens every 220 years, and then 22 years later, and then it doesn't happen again for another. It happened very recently, and you all probably didn't pay any attention to it. But that's what they were going to do. But Cook and Banks took with them not only astronomers, scientists, but they took botanists, Solander, who was a student of Linnaeus, Carolus Linnaeus, painters, and there's a theory that the painter who died on the trip, once people saw his paintings, that it was an influence on European landscape painting. So this voyage was probably, in my opinion, the second most important after Columbus. And it was an account of this voyage that Thomas Jefferson took into consideration when he sent Lewis and Clark out on their expedition. He also took botanists. Everybody on the journey of Lewis and Clark seems to have kept a journal, and their journal, it just goes on and on and on. Though, the great ones to read are Lewis, Captain Lewis, who incidentally had a man he called his servant, but he was really a slave, and his name was York. And York played a considerable important part in this journey, but he's not known. He's not recognized, and there are almost no memorials to him, though I think people are trying to change that. But the native people who had never seen a Negro or a black person, whenever Lewis and Clark and the expedition got into trouble, York would do some unique thing that would be engaging to the native people. And it's not to be belittled. It's to, if you put it in the scale of how interesting human beings can be in each other. The native people, having never seen someone like York, was just fascinated. And I had this experience while traveling in the Himalayas. People had never seen someone who looked like me, and they asked me if I was wearing a mask.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, human beings are very, we're very, someone said something so interesting to me today at lunch.
Yes.
About looking for other species in the universe and yes.
Amanda's comment about
Yes.
looking for life.
Yes,
Yeah.
We are looking for ourselves. The reason we haven't found life on the other planets is because we're looking for ourselves, but they don't look like us.
Yeah.
They're not like us.
They're not like us.
Sorry to, yeah.
You're taking a position in like the rap
Yes.
battle of
Yes.
20.
Yes. Can't you tell? Who's the better writer?
Who's the better writer of the two? I told you I was going to. Can we see slide number 7? You write about Monet's garden in in my garden book.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you to. I would love to just talk more about, because you visited Giverny.
Yes.
And then wrote about it, and I wanted to. This morning in the class we talked about the relationship of the written page to the garden plot. But I'd like to talk. You write about painting as intervening in the word, and I just would like you to talk about a little bit about. You talk at the beginning of my garden book. You say that cultivating a garden is an exercise in memory, and I feel like Monet's garden or these paintings were. You wrote about them as memories. In a way,
it was another painter who was losing his eyesight to macular something where you can only see the outside, you can't see the middle of something. And he said that, he told me that Monet made a garden so he could have something to paint because he was going blind. And that made so much...
Oh, wow.
That made so much sense to me that... and they were all gardeners. There's supposedly the man who... Kaibo, I don't know if you know.
Yes.
Yes, the scrapers,
yes,
the floor scrapers.
The floor scrapers.
My favorite. I just love that. But he's not as great a painter, in my humble opinion. But the floor scrapers is astonishing. But they used to exchange, because Kaibo was very rich.
Yes.
And they would exchange flowers. They would. The Monet's garden for me, I'd always wanted to see it. I want to see every garden everywhere. Really, I could just go to gardens all the time, and I was very interested in the things he incorporated in it, the way he trellised things, but I strangely enough didn't really learn or borrow much of anything from his garden. It was when I went inside the house, the chairs at the dining table were all painted yellow. So I immediately came home and painted all my chairs yellow. But a painter's garden is I don't know if painters do it anymore. But that group of people, they all made gardens, and and painted. Of course, then there's the horrible, where the onions and the cheeks and the breasts and Renoir.
Renoir.
It's all the same thing. But that garden. It's funny what when I saw the garden is. Then I began to look at the pictures. And I've never wanted to return to the garden, but I always want to see the pictures.
To see the pictures,
yes.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it was, Kenneth Nolan told me that, that he made the garden so he could have something to paint.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. You use the word borrow in your description of the yellow of the chairs.
Yes.
Right, but in the garden book, you have this one line, and it's, when reading Jamaica Kincaid, don't take the sentence too literally. But you wrote the sentence. You said, "Everybody I have ever met who has a garden has something growing in it from seeds that were gathered in Monet's garden. Usually it is hollyhocks. This makes sense. The seeds of hollyhocks are very easy to steal."
Yes.
Are they?
Yeah, I think I told you perhaps.
Tell them.
Yeah. So once, when America was still a country, we're not living in a country anymore, as I'm sure you know. During the Clinton administration, they would send cultural exchanges, and they sent a group of us to Estonia, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine. And there was some sort of Potemkin, like something Stalin had made. And we were shown it, and they had all these wonderful hollyhocks. And I stole some of the seeds and brought them back to my own garden. And I lost interest in them after a while, as one does about a garden, because it's not a cemetery, it's a garden. So then a few years, maybe 20 years ago, I was at the University of Tel Aviv, and some people who were very involved in peace now and so on took me to a village in the West Bank, which I'm sure doesn't exist anymore, where Palestinians lived, and it was under curfew. It was surrounded by a fenced-in. It was fenced in, and they had a curfew at 2:00. So we had to, as we were leaving, and it was close to 2:00, we had to get out. And as I was leaving, I saw some hollyhocks and again took some seeds, brought them back to Vermont, planted them. They bloomed, and you find them all over the garden. I planted them near the vegetable garden. You'll find them way past, away from the vegetable garden. Last year, and they're two different species. They're two different. One is Ficifolian, I think. One is the more oh dear, I'm forgetting the name of it. But I've never seen them together. They are, and I know them. And last year, for some reason, they both showed up side by side in the peony bed. And I thought that was a sign of something, but, but taking seeds I don't do it often, but I have stolen a pinch of a plant from the dentist because he wouldn't let me have it. And while he went to change something, I pinched something. Then another time I was giving a talk for Corning people who wanted to associate themselves with the glass flowers at Harvard, which if you've never seen them, go and see them before Dode sells them or something. is it dog or dog or whatever it is?
Doge.
When I don't like something, I almost can never pronounce the
Pronounce it
name
correctly,
properly. But they. I was going to tell you something about. So they gave a party for these flowers, and in a flower shop, and they had a beautiful flower, not one that blooms at Christmas. This is one of those cactuses that blooms at Easter, and I'm not remembering.
Oh, wow.
The name of it, but it grows like a waterfall, and then the whole thing is just covered with these huge red flowers, and they look sort of like sores, just this red sores falling down. It's quite beautiful, red sores. But at that exhibit, I had asked for the flower lady. I saw it there blooming. It was really beautiful, and I said, "Oh, can I just have a picture of that?" And she said no, so I took it. Now it blooms beautifully in my house. Yes, I wish I had to show.
I wanted to ask one last question before turning up the lights and allowing the audience.
But let me just tell you.
And that story about your hollyhocks, that is what spawned the conversation about looking for life. Because that seems like evidence.
That whole thing was so weird that those two different species of hollyhocks just ended up together. I would call people just to see it. It somehow had a sign of something, but I couldn't make out what it was. Though I will tell you, which you can find in my wonderful garden book for children, that this sunflower you see here, which is the national flower of Ukraine, is really native to Arizona. And I don't think the Ukrainians know that their national flower, that yellow, and you know the flag, it's the national flower of Ukraine. It's native to a group of native people use it for dyes, for food, and a German botanist took it to Europe, and then Stalin, of course, being Stalin. I think forced the Ukrainians to grow it because the sunflower seeds are very nutritious. So I just thought you might want to know that the national flower of Ukraine is from Arizona.
Arizona. Wow.
Also,
yes.
that in the things that come together in my writing, my three favorite subjects when I was a child, history, geography, and botany. And so a lot of times when you're reading me, you're reading my childhood regurgitated in these subjects.
I understand that, right? You know, I think that's where my question about your the Jane Eyre question came from. Do you know what I mean? The sense of
it was in that book I first read the word delphinium. She's walking along somewhere in the delphiniums. Delphiniums, what in
I wanted to, you said you just visited Antigua. And I know that there are many members of the audience who love a small place. And I wanted to ask you just, how was a small place received? And but you said you went back recently and
yes,
you know what I mean?
The younger people are accepting of it, and the older people, it's quite a while ago. They're mostly dead, or as things are in places like Antigua, nothing really changes, but something else gets put on top of what was there. So if you're driving along on a road to fix the road just means to cover over.
Yeah.
So the road gets higher and higher and higher. So that's what happened to a small place. It was not well received, as the truth generally is not well received. But the younger people, they like it, or they quote for it. It seems to give them some sort of inspiration or something. But I was quite pleased to see that my reception, I will go back all the time, but never let anybody know. But this time, I was visited by my old schoolmate, the Minister of Culture, or something. What culture would be in Antigua? It's sad to... the other place that I think has a Minister of Culture is France. It's always a bad sign when you have a Minister of Culture. Because culture isn't a government, it's, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt very all right there. For one thing, you know, I thought it would, well, this is a very interesting thing. For one thing, you could see it paints Antigua in a very, not a very good light. But what Antiguans could see is Donald Trump, and hey, you have a corrupt government too. Why can't they? But it's as if they were. I mean, that's the thing, you know. That's really frightening is how corruption is going to be the normal way of doing things. I don't know what people like us in this room are going to do, because I don't think we're corrupt. I don't know how we're going to. Because I feel somewhat ashamed that I'm not corrupt. I'm trying to be.
It's the way of being American right now.
It's the way, yes. It always has been, you know, but we were never really proud of it. We never tell your, you know, when you grow up, you'll be president. Who tells their child now, when you grow up, you'll be president? Just look at the president.
Yeah.
He's a convicted felon.
Yeah.
When you grow up, you'll be a convicted felon.
Yeah.
And a president.
So we have 2 mics stationed, I think, about mid-audience. And so we ask for Q&A, if you have questions, to please approach the mics. Can we turn the lights? Oh.
It's gotten darker.
It's very dark, yeah. I can't even see where the mics are.
Oh, there
we
it
go.
is.
There we go.
Yeah.
Where are the mics?
We went through a great deal of trouble rehearsing these lights and sounds.
Oh, is there a question?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for your time. I was wondering if you could share more thoughts on the idea of America not being a country anymore.
Oh gosh, this is going to be like preaching to the choir or something like that. But well, no, I used to be proud of, as you know, one could be of. Well, at least we're not like that. Not like Putin or the person in Argentina or North. I used to feel, well, in spite of everything, in spite of Richard Nixon, there was, in spite of his complications, Thomas Jefferson. I have a bust of Thomas Jefferson. It's made of plasticine, and I put it in the garden every year, and on the 4th of July, I say something to him, and you know, I understand his complications. He knew what he was doing was wrong, but he couldn't live without it. It's the kind of I can't live with you, but I can't live without you situation. And besides, he was a wonderful writer. You should read Notes on Virginia.
Notes on the State of Virginia.
Yeah, it's really a masterpiece of, self. Also, something to look at is his farm and garden book. They are divided into two separate things. In the garden book, you have no people really. The peas are planted and then they arrive at the table, and there's no connection between planting and having them a supper. It's in the farm book that you find one of his children by Sally needed many yards of cloth. Sally herself needs so many things, and they got wool. The Hemmings got wool or clothing, whereas many people didn't get. Yes, there were special treatments for them. So that's a complication. And then he has a little thing that I love to teach my students, a little column that he divides into. And in one side is white people, and on the other side is slaves. And he has number of white males, number of children, and then on the other column, number of slaves, and so on. And then he adds up the two columns, and then he adds the sum of the two columns into one. And the title of that is called Souls in My Family.
Oh,
It's
wow.
complicated.
Yeah.
He's a very it used to be a country. When I say talk about the country, it used to be a country where I could, for all its problems, say, there's Thomas Jefferson, or even George Washington, who with his complications, Washington's complications, he had their portraits of the Washington family, and it's Martha, her two children, and President Washington, and always in the background is a man who sometimes he looks like a butler, but he was a slave named William Lee, and he accompanied Washington in every campaign, fought in the War of Independence, was master of the hunt at Mount Vernon, and for some reason he and Washington quarreled. Now, what master quarrels with his slave?
Yeah.
And William Lee refused to speak to him and wouldn't even go to his deathbed. There are pictures of Washington, the paintings, because he was so revered. And Lee is in the painting, but they were not speaking at the time. Yet in his will, Washington's will, after he names Martha, he says, and to William Lee I leave a sum of money and his freedom, whether he wants it or not. It's online on Google, Washington's will. You can look it up. And so you wonder, well, what was that? I found out, did a bit of research and found out about that relationship. You can do it yourself. It's not clear what it is, but it's a complication of Washington. Well, things like that could make me feel, yes, it's a complicated country. It's the arc of justice. Well, it's not bending yet, but well, now I don't see any arc of justice at all. I just see one straight line to the bottom, and so that's what I meant about,
as per your right, you could. There was a time when you could describe what you were in as living in the complexity.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. But
and you had a language for how you could get out of it.
Yes.
The language didn't seem to get you out of it tomorrow or next year, but still.
Yes.
But now it's just all lost. You have a motor car on the White House lawn for sale.
Yeah.
It's like a desecration so profound. I don't know how you
Yeah.
get back from
From
this.
it, yeah.
So that's what
That's what you need.
yes.
Yeah.
Is there another? Yes,
Audience right.
Hello.
yes.
Thank you, Jamaica, so much for being here. This is such a gift. It's just a blessing. Thank you, Stephen, for putting this together. And I think we're all really lucky. Thanks for gracing us with your presence. Everything that you say and write is unbelievably amazing. And, so thank you. And I was just wondering, to keep it on the America tangent, I was wondering if you consider yourself to be an American writer, or do you consider yourself a writer without a home or a place?
Oh, I've never. Well, nowadays the question of identity seems to be fraught. For me, it's not fraught at all. I try not to be a nationalist. I have no feelings of nationalism at all. Or ethnic identity. I'm part Caribbean, part obviously sub-Saharan African. My children, 40-something% Ashkenazi Jew, and I suppose you don't have to say Ashkenazi Jew, because they're not Ashkenazi something else, are they? And less African, sub-Saharan African. So what am I to do? I myself converted to Judaism. I don't have a feeling of I'm hyphenation at all, which doesn't. I know it doesn't sound to people as how could that be true? But it's absolutely true. I don't really feel. Am I an American writer? Well, I live in America, and had I gone to England, let me just put it this way: had I been one of those unfortunate people from the Caribbean to have gone to England, I would not have been the person sitting here.
Yeah.
Yes, it would not have been allowed. Look at that black woman living in Montecito. She can't even make a cake without people trying to kill her. So for identity, I try not to get, I clearly am black. I identify with the ancestral narrative that's attached to me. I identify with it and am in it, but I don't know what to do with it. So many people have. What I'm trying to make myself into before I die, I'm 75 years of age, what I'm trying to make myself into is a human being. And I know this sounds very kumbaya. I happen to love kumbaya, by the way. I just think it's such a wonderful, I don't know why. I think the people who make fun of it are the people who most should sing it. But really, I'm trying to be a human being and find out what that means, so that I don't so readily separate myself from the suffering of others, and so therefore cause it. Don't clap, because I really meant it. It wasn't an applause line. It was. I am trying. So to say I'm an American writer, I remember when I first started to write on my work with a pair in the New Yorker, I would get letters from people, women mostly, and they clearly were white. They lived in suburbs, you could tell, and and they identified with I was writing about a little black girl from Antigua, and they identified with her ups and downs and her friendships and her mother separating from her mother and so on. So I don't know. Am I an American writer? Well, it's hard to be an American anything, as I keep saying nowadays. But I identify with the John Brown America, with the Frederick Douglass America. There's certain, the Sacagawea America. And I am from Antigua, but to say you're an Antiguan, my mother came from Dominica, and people from Antigua didn't like Dominicans because Dominicans had very French influence ways, and that was such a stupid thing. You just see the stupidity of human beings. We all got off the same boat, but then they didn't like St. Vincent's. Didn't like them at all. Yes, it's why they couldn't form a federation, because they didn't, so I just would like to be a better person. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So on the topic of making oneself into a human being, in February 1995, you published an essay called Putting Myself Together in the New Yorker. And it remains one of the best things that magazine has ever published. And in it, we get, you reflect on your 20s, and you reflect on your youth and all the sort of things that you got into, all the troubles, but all the fun and all the joys. We really get a sort of flashpoint of life. And I'm wondering, in writing about one's life, how do you know which details to include? In that essay, we get such a portrait of you, but it's an oblique portrait. We learn a lot, but we also learn quite little. The essay ends with, I was 28, I was 29, by 30, I was married. And I'm just wondering, as you sift through all these kinds of memories, you seem to zero in on very particular details that I think are rather unexpected. A hat, coffee enemas, things like that. So I'm just wondering.
Coffee enemas.
So how do you know what will matter?
I don't. I had no idea that it mattered to you. I don't. When I write, I don't have an audience. Even when I wrote a small place, the audience I used to have was William Shawn, who was my editor at the New Yorker, and when I wrote Putting Myself Together, he was dead by then. So and the New Yorker had become anyway. The audience for that would have been only myself. I've never really, even when I wrote for him, it was a way of telling him who I really was. But who can say who they really are? That's the thing with falling in love and I'll give you an example. So my children's father didn't like open spaces, and he's written about it, it's not a secret, or closed spaces and so on. I, on the other hand, love going everywhere. If you say, there's this, I will go and see it. So on my birthday, I think it was my early 60s birthday, I was living in Claremont, California, and I wanted them to see the Imperial Sand Dune, which is one of the it's apparently the longest sand dune in the world. So I wanted my children to see it, and we drove all the way down to the Salton Sea and, the canals of water from the Colorado used to grow rice in the desert. Don't get me started on the Colorado. Anyway, in the distance, we could see on the horizon the sand dune, just beautiful. And my children who grew up in Vermont, they were just astonished by it. And my son said to me, Mom, you like this so much. Why did you marry Dad? And I said to him, without thinking, just what I said, I didn't know myself. And that was true. I didn't know when I wrote about putting myself together. I wrote about someone I knew then, but didn't know that me now it would exist. So as for what you put in what you have. In my case, the obligation is to the writing, does this word work? Does this work? And I sometimes instinctively, I can write quickly. I just know how something will feel, how it will sing, how it will dance or whatever on the page. And so in writing that, by that time it had been in the past, and I had a certain confidence of how that part of my life had worked out, because here I was with children. I could show a sand dune, you see. So
Thank you so much.
I think I see someone over.
yes.
Hi. What's the favorite work that you've ever made, or what piece are you most proud of?
Oh, I never read my own writing, unless somebody pays me. I would never read my own writing. What would be the point? I can't learn anything from it. It's already done. I seriously, one of my students gathered a lot of my early work, which is now just being published. I was just shocked at some of it. Look at it and just think, wow, did I write that? Like the piece, Putting Myself Together. I can barely remember writing it, but I remember everything in it. But I would never read it. It would just, first of all, for me, writing is an attempt to say who I really am, what I'm really doing. This is, and then once I've done it, I feel so embarrassed that I've let people know something about me. So I can't say I have a favorite. I wish I could be someone. I'm very glad I've written what I've written, and I hope to write a lot more. But I don't want to really think of it as having to do anything with me. Though I have to say I appreciate your appreciating what I've done very much. I'm very grateful for it, but I would never have a favorite. Though one thing, yes, the last novel I wrote, I felt I was almost acrobatic-like, and I was very pleased. So that, for instance, it gave me great pleasure to write, and I'll tell you one. So the family lives in the Shirley Jackson house, and they're falling apart, and I was writing about some disagreement. The little boy, whose name is Heracles, not Hercules, Heracles, was having, and suddenly I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. Never meant to make it up. Just came out, and I was so happy. So if that was a favorite, I I loved. It just came out, because the family lives at the Shirley Jackson house.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Thank you.
Maybe one last question?
sure.
Okay.
Hi. So as a Caribbean international student, it's been so fascinating to read your work and then to listen to you speak about the experience of growing up in the Caribbean and then being sent away. And that's something I very much empathize with, being sent away, or at least going away, certainly not quite as violent as what you would have experienced.
Yes.
And then anecdotally, right, you've mentioned often that the Caribbean culturally is a region that can be quite insular, both in a small place or in the anecdote you just shared about St. Vincentians and Antiguans and whatnot. So my question for you is about Caribbean cultural identity and bringing those two things together. How do you see the role of the diaspora, right? Us who have been sent away, who are away, in forming Caribbean cultural identity? And what direction do you think that might take?
Oh gosh, this sounds like something that the World Health Organization, which doesn't exist anymore, should. But I think the mistake, for me, the mistake in your question, not in you, but in the way you formed it, is this idea that we are in a diaspora. I'm not sure that it's right. It's like applying the word colonizer to certain things, certain situations. It's not quite right. We need another word for it, but we haven't come up with it, and because I think we've gotten lazy or something. But we're not in a diaspora. We're not going back to Africa. I went to Kenya once. I've been to Kenya, and I was quite offended when the people who had invited me told me, "Welcome home." I thought that was very presumptuous. And the idea of contributing culturally, culture is one of those things, that you can't really, you can't. It's just what happens between people. Look at our own, what used to be our own country, how people mix things up even as they hate each other, or try to deprive one group of people who tries to deprive another group of people of certain rights and freedoms, are so quick to culturally adopt. How many white people said bro before? Or, so, and is that cultural? But I think that the concentration on groups and is not a good idea. It's almost as if you're laying the foundation to violate, So, well, if we're in the diaspora, will we go back home? An example of the return of Africans to Africa is Liberia. That did not end well for the indigenous Liberians. So I would say try to do no harm. Don't vote for Republicans. That would be the beginning of, yeah. And if I've offended any Republicans in the audience, I'm very happy I've done so.
Jamaica, first of all, thank you for your work. I've enjoyed. I enjoyed rereading for this event, but I've had decades of studying literature and really learning from you.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank-
Thank you for your generosity sitting with us this evening.
So, just one last thing occurred to me about the identity and culture. You know, that I told you about the Wordsworth and not seeing the daffodil. So one day when I was thinking about it in Vermont, I decided to plant daffodils, and so now I have about 23,000 daffodils on the lawn. And when they're blooming, I recite Wordsworth. He was a very wonderful influence in my life, in spite of the people who tried to separate him from me.
Yeah.
And so this is the thing when we talk about culture. There's no purity in culture. The minute you have purity in culture, you're going to start putting people in ovens and you're going to kill them. You're going to do terrible things. There is no one culture. There is many, and we can. You know, a Thai restaurant opened in North Bennington, Vermont, and I'm very happy. Thank you.
Thank you.